I promise it will be an interesting session because of the kind of panel that we have to talk on a really fascinating topic of accelerating a shift towards public transport. Now the question, a general question that I would have for all the panelists, I have specific questions of course, but is building mass transit systems only a necessary condition for bringing about a shift? Or is it also a sufficient condition for bringing about a shift? I think this is the key question that we need to be thinking about. Is there something that we need to do beyond building these systems? Is there something plus that we need to do? I think that is what will help accelerate a shift towards public transport. Yesterday in the inaugural session, the Honorable Minister did mention about 2047 and our vision for 2047. And the message that he was trying to very clearly give is public transport is the way forward. But if public transport is the way forward, then what is it that we need to do to get people away from personal motor vehicles towards public transport? So that broadly will be the theme of this session. And I don't want to spend more time talking, but let's listen to the panelists. I'll start with Mr. Brajesh. Brajesh, you are leading the work on Nagpur Metro, the Pune Metro, plus there are a number of other cities that are in Maharashtra that are thinking of metro systems. You are better aware about what status they are in. What I'm particularly impressed with is you've also been the pioneer in coming up with the idea of a lower cost metro system option for the smaller cities in India. The Metro Neo is something that you've sort of pioneered. But the question I have for you is really, what is it that we need to do beyond building these systems to get people to shift to public transport? What are the initiatives you've taken in Nagpur and Pune? What do you plan to do? What are your ideas? Over to you.
Thank you so much. Making a metro line is only the beginning of it. A lot is to be done after this to get the people. The real objective is to reduce the load on the road, get the ridership. And we in Nagpur had very good experience in that regard, that our ridership has already reached the level of 90,000 per day. And what needs to be done are, that those are simple things. First and last mile connectivity, multimodal integration. We have worked on each one of them. Working with the municipal corporation to reschedule the bus routes, to provide the stoppages at all the stations, providing a feeder service, providing non-motorized transport at the station, having a MOU with the auto rickshaws, providing e-rickshaws at each station and things like that. But the one initiative which I would like to mention in case of both Nagpur and Pune, which have been path-breaking, is the implementation of the concept of TOD. Nagpur was the first city in the country where the TOD notification was issued in the year 2016. And the same has been issued now in case of Pune also. And what TOD is doing basically, increasing the density of population along the mass transit corridor by way of increasing the FSI. Means the construction rights. The FSI on both sides up to 500 meters of the corridor have been doubled. And it has actually been implemented at the ground level. And the very big advantage of this has been that whatever income is generated by extra construction rights is divided between the Maha-Metro and the municipal corporation equally. So what we are doing is not only increasing the density along the mass transit corridor, which will help in future to increase the ridership and reduce the load on the road, but increasing our resources also at the same time to take care of the requirements of that increased load. We have started receiving our share of funds from the municipal corporation already. Another thing state government has done in case of Maharashtra, and we are thankful to them, was to increase the stamp duty by 1 percentage point and giving that money to Metro to take care of the requirement of mass transit system. One more thing I would like to mention is, by increasing the FSI under the TOD, our own stations are taking the advantage. So all our stations, wherever advantages can be taken, are having the multiple floors above them ready for construction, which will be constructed in the due course in future whenever the PPP opportunities arise, and again that will help Metro to financially to discharge their obligations. So by doing all this first and last mile connectivity, multimodal integration, TOD, we are ensuring an atmosphere where people will get a very good choice of a public transport which they didn't have so far. And then we are reaching the people directly. We have been having the system of Samvad, both in Nagpur and in Pune, and so far we had 200 of Samvad with people around all the stations. We go on every Saturday and Sunday in the colonies near all our stations and we spread the message of public transport. And I tell you, our ridership has gone because of these Samvads. Particularly we are targeting youth, college going students, tuition class going students, and particularly the girl students and females, because we have got one coach out of 3 reserved for females. Female safety is a very big issue, and we have been able to communicate this message across the city that the metro is the safest mode of transport, and which has helped a lot in our getting the ridership. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rajesh. I think that's really the thinking that metro is only the beginning of the piece. Building that system is really the beginning of the piece, and a lot more needs to be done. I think that's a very powerful message that you're conveying. Let me now move to Mr. Vinay Kumar Singh. Vinay, you are building an extremely prestigious project in the National Capital Region. And Delhi is projected to become the world's most populous urban agglomeration. In the next 4 to 5 years, it will overtake Tokyo and become the world's most populous urban agglomeration. And with this kind of a size, I can't imagine everyone within the municipal corporation of Delhi's boundary will have to probably spread within the region. And that's where your project becomes a very powerful project. But Brijesh talked about transit-oriented development, and I know that you've taken a number of initiatives in this. Could you tell us a little more on what you've done on your side?
Thank you, sir. In fact, sir, I would like to reply to this particular issue in 2 different ways. So the first one is how we are trying to improve the ridership of the system, because that is a main mandate. So we have gone for extensive multimodal integration with the existing systems and the systems which have already been planned, whether it is in Delhi, Meerut, Gurugram, because this RRTS system is going deep into the states up to 150 kilometers, and we know that more than 40% of the vehicles which enter into Delhi, they come from the NCR. So if we are to move the people from cars to public transport, we have to catch them at their origin. And if we can do that, it can reduce the number of private vehicles in Delhi. We know that pollution has a very serious impact on Delhi's atmosphere nowadays. So in this process, we have gone for interoperability of our 3 priority corridors. Future also we will have that. Number 2, serious multimodal integration with Delhi metro stations, with the national railway station, with the airport, and we have chosen the location of stations in a way that this multimodal integration becomes very effective, and the penalty on change of mode on a passenger or commuter is minimum. So by this, we know that we are going to improve the ridership of the system, which will finally help us in exploiting the potential in the system in terms of the property development or the other businesses we have gone for a very extensive study of our corridors. We have found out centralities around these stations. We have planned at the corridor level what we have to do where, so that not only we can provide this commuter transport the whole of the NCR, but we develop facilities in a way that the total requirement of movement of people other than public transport gets reduced. So, and we are working very closely with the state governments. UP was not having any TOD policy just a few months back. We were working with government of UP, and we got this policy approved by the cabinet of government of UP, which will be applicable for all transit modes, public transit modes in UP. And similarly in Delhi also, we have 3 stations, and we have got 3 nodes approved by the DDA, which is the Developmental Authority in Delhi. So we are working with very, very close coordination to plan the zonal plan around these stations, whether it is in Delhi and in UP. And we are the chosen authority to develop these plans. In the process, we intend to develop areas around the station in a way so that on one side it allows and facilitates the movement of people towards these stations in a very comfortable way and in a seamless way. On the other hand, we are talking to last mile connectivity providers, and we are doing very extensive work around our stations where we will provide facilities to last mile service providers so that area is very orderly and it becomes very convenient for people to enter into a station or come out of a station, and they get a very comfortable last mile connectivity. We are doing technological integration with the last mile connectivity providers. We are providing them facility at the station so that the people can move very comfortably on this public transport system. So on one side we intend to get the fare box collections increased. On the other side, non-fare box collection where we are using various methods of land value capture. We are going for development of the I'll give you one example. In Duhai depot, which is our first base depot, we are trying to attract amusement park operators. We are bringing in big restaurant chains. We are creating a criticality of entertainment and amusement parks or this dining facilities. In fact, some of these operators are very, very fascinated with this idea because we have a train from all around the NCR every 10 minutes to this location. So this which they find very interesting, and this is going to help us. In Delhi, we are going to develop a NCRTC complex in the heart of the Delhi, which will not only provide us upfront money, but it will give on sustainable basis. It will give good revenue to us because we know that just by fare box we will not be able to fulfill the requirement of what expenditure liabilities we have in next 15 or 20 years. Sir, as you know, the first 10-15 years are most critical for our kind of project, where we have to pay back the loans, we have to pay back the interest on that, and the ridership is less in the initial years by the time we move to public transport. So these next 5 to 10 years, we seriously want to work with our partners, get money through the VCF, through the property development, those instruments, and we want to create a long-term strategy for sustainability of this system. Thank you.
Thanks for that. That is fascinating. You spoke at the very early stage about the need to grab the passenger at his point of origin itself. And I think there are 2 strategies that you seem to have adopted, of either taking your station to that origin or shifting that origin to your station. So your feeder systems are really carrying your station to the origin, and your TOD efforts are shifting that origin to your station. So I think a very good strategy, great, all the best, congratulations for all that effort. But with that, let me move to Mr. Mihir Surti. See, there are, many cities that I have seen with excellent public transport systems, but congestion still hasn't gone away. But two cities that come to my mind where they seem to have cracked that problem is either Singapore or Seoul. And the reason they seem to have done that, to my mind, is apart from building mass transit systems, excellent mass transit systems, which is the supply side of the equation, they've also simultaneously done fairly rigorous demand side management. So the demand side of the equation is also being taken care of. But in ADB, you working in many cities in Asia, you funded projects in many cities in Asia. Can you tell us a little more of what is the experience from Asian cities in making the shift happen?
Thank you, Dr. Agrawal. This question that you have raised is not very easy. Building mass rapid transit systems is the easier part, but the real difficult challenge comes thereafter. In Singapore and Seoul, as you rightly said, supply side management, apart from that, they've really managed travel demand also. These cities, basically the key issue here is that they are having an integrated transport authority, which even in the earlier sessions we've discussed, cities in India are lacking. So there is a disconnect between urban planning and transport planning. And therefore, what actually is happening is there is a need for, we are not in a position to actually implement TOD or VCF or town planning schemes. So metro alignment cannot actually be seen in isolation. So it has to be, these are all linked to each other. For example, and this has a direct impact on the ridership. Like in the public transport, there's a flyer of CEW which I was looking today. So it's not only about metro riderships, it's also about the bus ridership, which says that by 2030, the modal share of bus transport would reduce from 17% to 9% from 2020. Similar is the case of Chennai Metro, where we started working in 2011-12. And then the ridership, it is now that the ridership has gone up to 2 lakh per day. So of course there were issues related to pandemic and so on. But the ridership took a very considerable time to increase. I feel that there are 4 or 5 key enablers that would be critical going forward. The first one is basically our parking policy. So we also had a session on TOD just before this, and Madam spoke about the parking norms, the need for revision of parking norms. Just to give you an example of Tokyo, when we visited there a couple of years back, there was a office complex, a huge building with around 2,000 employees, and the parking space was only for 3 cars, the vice president and the 2 presidents. The rest of 1,997 employees were supposed to use public transport. And why it is succeeding there is because the nearest public parking system is 1 kilometer away from the office, and the charge is around 10,000 rupees per day. So maybe these kind of, whether we are in a position to adopt these kind of policies or not, that's a separate issue. But we really need to look at such kind of interventions. The second enabler, I've already said, it's about the integrated transport authority model, which is there in Singapore and Seoul. The third enabler could be the regulations, a regulatory mechanism, where we could have service level benchmarks of public transport service standards. If we can establish them, that would set up benchmarks for the public utility providing the transport service. For example, there are examples in European Union has its Public Service Obligations Act. Also there is a Bus Service Act which is there in UK. So these are very comprehensive acts which comprehensively cover the entire gamut of public transport, such as what an operator should be doing, what are the standards that he should maintain, how to change an operator, what should be his tenure, what should be the duration. So all these kinds of things are still lacking in the public sphere and public transport in India. And the last enabler I feel would be innovative mechanisms. Financial mechanisms such as, like, are we in a position to have mechanisms where we unbundle the bus services for increasing efficiency, unbundle the ownership of assets as well as the operations, so where we can enhance the efficiency of the bus services. Or one recent example is from the Mumbai Metro Line 3 yesterday, where they have given private access to stations to private operators. So, and this is being done at the cost will be reimbursed by the private operator. So these are a few key enablers if we can look at, then going forward, these would be very interesting options as far as increasing the ridership in public transport systems is concerned. I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think some fascinating ideas you've given. We'll come back to these in a little while. But with that, let me shift to Terry. Terry, Neil spoke about the Integrated Transport Authority in most of the other cities which have sort of really helped. Now France, I think most of the French cities also have a similar kind of an authority. But going beyond the authorities, can you give us something on the experience from France, on what they've done to accelerate the shift towards public transport? Is it just about building it, or what else have they done to make that shift happen?
Thank you very much, Dr. Agarwal. Well, I would say to summarize what has been done over the past years, that cities have adopted a more user-friendly approach in general to urban transport, and they've tried to develop the ridership and the mode share. They've tried to act on all the components of urban on users' needs. I don't know if I could have the first slide, because I had 2 slides but, on the screen. Anyway, what I would like to say first is that there's been a change of the image of public transport, and municipalities have tried to show public transport as more modern. At the beginning of the 80s. On the left-hand side, you have the new tram you have the tram in Montpellier, right in the town centre. This process started in the 80s. The tram was seen as old. With that, the image was changed. Buses as well. We implemented buses with a high level of services, so that the image was changed, and urban public transport was presented as more modern, more efficient, because they had right of way or dedicated lanes, and in a way more trendy. So that was an important thing. Then again, we have to put this in the wider context. This was not only an issue about transport, it was an urban move, and I want to underline the link between urban and transport. At the same time, beginning in the 80s, the allocation of public space was reviewed. Streets in the town centres were pedestrianised, and less space was given to cars, be it lanes or parking. And in case parking was badly done by motorists, the fines could be increased. Now, as I said, buses and trams got dedicated lanes, as you can see on the third picture, which is in Nantes, in the west of France. This is the busway. So, a new change of approach and perspective. At the same time, when you had dedicated lanes, at the end of the lanes, at the outskirts of the cities, you are parking so that people could change their mode of transport and access to town centres. Now, if we take the perspective of the user itself and put ourselves in his shoes, I would say that, to summarize, the municipalities try to make things easier for passengers. Can I have the next slide, please, the last one? Now, first of all, there is a unique approach. There is a unique approach in municipalities on urban transport, because usually in metropolitan areas you have transport authorities that are in charge of urban and transport. So you have a pilot in the plane, you have a common approach. Now, let's put ourselves in the user's shoes. To make things easier for them, there was integration, and intermodality was developed. Like cities created interchanges, and so that to foster physical intermodality. At the same time, the coordination of fares was implemented. Here we have three examples I will comment. Before you had several, not modes, but several systems of transport with several fares. Integration was developed. On the top left you have the Navigo Pass, which is used in Paris, which enables you to travel on all the network in the Paris region. So that was, if I may say so, step number one. The second one, the yellow one, is the Corrigo Pass, which is used in the west of the country, in Brittany. And with the Corrigo Pass, you can use it in towns, but also to go on the regional railway system, and you've got other facilities unrelated to transport, like going to libraries, etc. So this interconnection was made to make life easier for passengers. The third example is a Via Navigo app, with which you can also plan your route. Now, in addition, an action was taken on fares. Basically, I would say that traditionally France has had some very low transport fares for two reasons. It's a political choice, but also municipalities have got a special dedicated tax that they receive to implement transport. This enables to have low fare. If I take the example of Paris, the pass you can see, the blue pass, the monthly fare for this pass is 75 euros. I would say $75 because with the rate of exchange. 50% is paid by the employer, and this scheme of 50% paid by the employer was extended to the whole of France a few years ago. The number of zones in Paris was reduced to 1. We went from 5 to 1, so that you had a greater service with your fare. We also worked on social fares, and recently, we've got a whole range of social fares according to what is your status, but also have been created solidarity fares, so that based on the income you would pay very low. Some municipalities are implementing, not the major ones, free transport, like the city of Dunkirk in the north of France decided that transport must be free. Now, another aspect that cities have been working upon to develop the modal share is data sharing. It is mandatory by law, the recent framework law on urban transport of 2019, that operators should share their data with transport authorities. And transport authorities, so that they can create apps and help passengers with their routes, which is a way, as you know, to optimize the use of transport system and the travel of passengers. Last point I would like to make is a greater focus has been put on the quality of service. Like if I take the example of the Paris region, the Transport Authority, which used to be STIF and now called IDFM, has got 4 major indicators of service that are closely monitored and followed. For example, they monitor the density of the offer, the punctuality, the cleanliness of station, the mechanical stairs, are they working or not, and the information. So transport services, like most of the transport services in other sectors, are far more user-oriented. Now, what can we say if we have a look at the evolution of the modal share? Of course, there are differences according to cities, the size of cities, etc., and the categories of population. Basically, in the Paris region, the modal share went from 20% for public transport to 22% in 2018. Then we had the COVID thing that changed the perspective. In Lyon, the second major city, we went from 10% at the end of the 70s to 18% nowadays. And in Strasbourg, to take a third example, we went from 8% in late 70s to 11% today. So, to answer your question, Dr. Agawa, is the offer a necessity or a necessary condition? Looking at the statistics, not going into details, I would say it's a condition, but we have a lot of other things, as you know, we can play upon, and we've been trying to act on all the elements of the public transport to develop the conditions.
Thanks, Eric. That was fascinating. I think the French example is something that has been talked about in many parts of the world. Not many have been able to replicate that, but particularly the idea of the transport tax and charging the employer to pay something to the employees' travel. I think that's something really but fascinating. With this, let me turn to Laghu Parashar, the deputy project head right now of the Smart SUT in GIZ. Laghu, we spoke about unbundling bus services. And we all know that if metro systems have to succeed or mass transit systems have to succeed, you need buses to also succeed. That linkage is very important. Vinay also spoke about feeder bus systems. But the overall emphasis now seems to be shifting from a state-owned, state-operated bus service to a stronger role for PPPs in bus services. What is your view on this, and how do you think this whole ecosystem for strengthening bus services is possible? How can we start meeting the demand-supply gap for public bus services? Your thoughts on this, generally strengthening public bus services?
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. So, yeah, indeed, looking at the benefits of the PPP in bus operation, or whatever experience we have from last 6 decades of state-owned and operated bus model as compared to the PPP, there is a national level push also we have seen in last few years, be it in terms of e-buses or otherwise on PPP. But at the same time, PPP in bus operation is not something that is a new concept for us. We have been operating since 2005, if not before that. We started with Indore, and now my broad assessment is more than 20 cities in India are operating on a PPP model in bus operation. We have our own learning, and you talk about the ecosystem, and most of the time this discussion of PPP in bus operation circled around two things. We started each discussion with the NCC versus GCC, okay, and a good contract model, a good contractual documentation. I think without getting into the debates of the NCC and GCC, what I believe is that both the models in terms of city size contextually important somewhere. We have the best practices of the NCCs also in terms of Singapore, in terms of Hong Kong, while at the same time we have not so good practices of GCC also. So contextually both are fitting into some city sizes and depending upon the capacity of the city what they can operate. Second thing is when cities narrow down on this NCC versus GCC, whatever they want to adopt, they directly jump into the contracting. They try to create a perfect contract model. But it's very difficult to answer when the same contract document is successful in one city, why it got failed in another city. So somewhere we are missing the point. Okay. So if the contracting model and the contracting document are not ensuring the success in every city, so somewhere there is a right ecosystem is missing. So what are the right ecosystem, what are the prerequisites we can do to ensure that the sustainability of the PPP in the bus operation? Based on whatever the experience of so far cities has implemented the bus operation in India, I would say there are 3 to 4 prerequisites to ensure that. First is start giving the time to the planning process. Okay. Give requisite time before jumping into the contracting part, which includes the operational planning. You talk about the demand supply, what is the passenger demand and supply, what kind of fleet we need. Second is the infrastructure planning. Okay, what kind of infrastructure we require to deliver that operation plan. And once we have that, what is the business plan we have? Okay, how much money we need in terms of capex and opex. Okay, so invest that kind of a time before we jump into the contract. And once we have this operation and the planning part is ready, the cities will be able to identify those policy reforms and the regulatory reforms to deliver to sustain the PPP. Okay. For example, before even getting into the contracting part, you need right fare policy. You need right parking policy into the city. Okay. Okay, you need the right regulatory environment to ensure the least competitions of the informal transport. Okay, all these things happen in the city once you have the private operator on board. Okay, so I think this is one of the one of the prerequisites I would say. Second is the sustainable funding. Okay, and when I say sustainable funding, it is different from just funding. Okay, because once you have committed to a private operator, your fund outflow is fixed. So, but just depending on the annual budgetary provision will not ensure the sustainable funding. So make sure that cities are generally highly dependent on the annual budget provision, okay, which is not enough. I think the sustainable funding, in a way, you are tied up with the right resources, which is giving you the funding in a consistent way. Okay, somewhere I would like to quote the example of we have the urban transport funds, and you started this program. Rajasthan, I would like to give the example. Rajasthan, through the various sources, they collect as high as 280 crore per year. Okay, urban transport fund which directly go to the bus operation and the metro funding. So this kind of a consistency without depending on the consolidated budget, annual budget provision. Another good example is this Gujarat viability gap funding scheme, where at a state level the government acknowledges that bus operation cannot be sustained by only fare provisions. So there is a, if you are operating on the bus operation on PPP, there is a per kilometer rate you will get. So this is somewhere at a state level it is being acknowledged. Okay, the bus operation require funding, and for over a period of time consistently you will get kind of a funding. Okay. Third thing, if I may talk about for this ecosystem which you were asking, is the robust institutions. Many of the places where this PPP bus operation started, although a lot of SPVs were formed, but SPVs there were hardly any structure within those SPV, both in terms of leadership, both in terms of skilled manpower. Okay. The one thing which we miss is the long-term leadership and the exclusive leadership. We have seen people sitting at a leadership level in these organizations having 4 or 5 additional responsibilities. So there is no exclusivity, number one, and there is no long tenure. So when you have a tenure of 6 months or 1 year, you cannot have a long-term vision also. Okay. And at the same time, there are functions you need to, once you sign the contract, your work start from that day. It's not the end date. So there are functions you need to deliver, and for that you need skilled manpower, both in terms of monitoring, infrastructure, and the contract management, be it ITS. So that skilled manpower, the city need to invest. Okay. Once all these ecosystem requirements are fulfilled, I would say then get into the contracting part. So that the sustainability of the PPP can be ensured.
Very interesting development taking place in India. The whole role of the private sector in operating buses, the whole role of the state transport undertakings in managing those bus services rather than just operating them. You brought up the issue of finance, I think really fascinating. But moving to Athar Sahib, I deliberately kept you at the end because I have the most difficult question for you, and something that all of us are really scratching our head on. It's about, when projects get approved, Nagpur Metro or the RRTS project, funds get approved for that project. Now, there's so much more they have to do to make that project successful. Are there innovative methods by which they can get financing for this? It's one thing to say that the project should be given additional money for all this, but the struggle that they have to go to in just getting money for that project is so much that looking beyond that have to really look in different ways. So any ideas on how innovative funds can be thought of going beyond the public budget, not just new schemes, but going beyond the public budget? What are ways in which that can be done? I told you it's the most complex, it's something you're all struggling with. So.
Sure, sir. Thanks for having me here. And sir, if you see traditionally, the first thing everyone here knows, traditionally, mostly in MRTS projects, because of this complexity of the problem, all major large metros have been run on government funding. So private sector and private sector capital is shied away from getting involved in MRTS projects largely. Where there has been success, the end goal was very clear. They were either aligned to a major CBD, they were running, or they were aligned to a major gateway. They were giving a specific facility to reach an airport or an access to a major business district. Now, fundamentally, the problem starts if you look at the cash flows of any MITS operation. The cash flow any time across the world is never sufficient even to service debt. So the cash flow available for debt servicing is very limited, and that's where majority of the financing you look will have grants in it. We will think about a lot of financing from multilateral development banks, which is long-term concessional. So one of the key challenges in our country is that if you look at our capital market, all the loans door-to-door tenor is 12 years, 15 years. You stretch it maximum 16, 18 years. But these operations need 30, 35-year product, and that's where a JICA product or a EDB product becomes very relevant for them. Now, if the train operation is not generating enough revenue streams for doing something else, then that means there has to be some bit of innovation in the way the project is conceptualized. Because clearly, let's agree to this that even in super crush load, train operations will not be able to generate this enough volume to justify for another development. That's kind of, people have done the maths and it's quite clear. Now, this is when we start thinking about financing, at the core of solving this problem lies the way we are proposing the whole land use and transport integration. And this whole land use transport integration is where the innovation of adding non-fare revenue and the predictability around those cash flows of non-fare revenues becomes very interesting for people to step in and think about alternate sources of capital, whether we're trying to raise bonds around some projects or whether we are saying let's securitize this revenue, which could be in the form of lease revenue, which could be in the form of a tax increment financing fund. There's too many impact fees that are there. And what has happened, because there's been lesser predictability around this innovation, the financing entities have not been sure about whether this provision will continue or whether it will change because of change in government, change in policy. People have stayed away from this. So the way to think about this is to say that step one, how do we improve the funnel of our revenue streams, which is coming through these non-fare revenue schemes. We have heard about value capture financing. We have talked about creating a transport fund that generates additional. Essentially, what all they are trying to do is linking the beneficiaries of the project with project financing, and that is very important for us to really see that the funding cannot come from Delhi for any city. The funding has to be generated from those things. Hong Kong Metro, even in COVID years, the transport operations was loss-making, but the retail and the real estate business generated profit even in 2019 and 2020. 60% of the total revenue comes from those businesses, and one of the fundamental ways they are able to do is that early on they identify land parcels. So even before the route is announced, the land parcel is available to monetize, so that in future, once the route is announced, the upside on that land valuation is available to that metro organization, by which they can do a lot of property plus development model, and that becomes. The second key thing, sir, is the whole institutional integration. If you look at Transport for London, the mayor of London and the head of TfL, they are the same person. And if we are trying to really integrate additional revenue streams to create avenues for exploiting new revenue streams, this institutional integration gives a lot of comfort to lenders to say, we agree with this plan that there will be an ability to raise cess or incremental tax, incremental financing, and that would really support that. The last piece I will say, sir, is that I think it's time, in India especially, that new greenfield developments of metro rail and brownfield need to be a bit differentiated. For example, if we are having a city where we are thinking about phase 7 or phase 6 development or phase 4, then we have a set of predictable cash flows through phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3. And how are you monetizing that? If I already have an asset class to say, even before I thought about financing phase 4, I had phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, clear transport operations which generate a minimum revenue through getting revenues. I have 100 stations available with me which can generate a lot of advertising and non-fare revenue. Could I securitize some of that and use it for financing my next phase versus somebody who's about to deliver the first 12 kilometer or first 30 kilometer of line? I think that kind of differentiating between a well-established metro network going for the next phase of financing versus a new city, I think those are the fundamental ways to think about it.
Thanks very much. I think this is really a lesson that both Rajesh and Vinay will want to carry with them. They have the burden of additional lines and new projects that they will be taking up. But the message I get is, don't focus only on building your project for now, but think much longer ahead to see how you can keep it financially sustainable through action that you take now. I think that's the big message that I'm giving. I think that's a great lesson. Now, fortunately, since panelists have been very disciplined to the time that I suggested, we have plenty of time now for any questions from the audience. So anyone who would like to make a comment or have a question to any of the panelists, we have a fair bit of time for that. Anyone? I don't see Professor Sarkar. Someone, yeah, please, Samir.
My question is to Mihir.
Samir, get the mic closer to your lips.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, we are not.
Yeah. My question is to Mihir. And one of the ways of doing the demand management is, increasing the parking rates and so on and so forth. But other way is also to kind of restricting the investment in alternate mode, like not doing the widening of roads or not deploying more buses on the same corridor. Is there any example, in the various cities internationally, that such measures are taken and what has been the experience? That's the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I am actually not aware of such instances, but as an alternate source of traffic demand or travel demand management, there are tools such as lot of utilities are now using AI and ML tools for very real-time online assessment of travel demand management, and that is what is also leading to customer service centric planning, and which basically enables the utility or the bus network to plan as per the customer preferences as well as real-time demand management. So there are certain cases, I'm not very sure, but in Auckland in New Zealand and in Australia, such instances, they are practicing these kind of utilities are doing these innovations.
Any others?
Hello. Yes, sir. I'm Ramana, Executive Director Planning, Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation. The sport of metro systems in India is quite encouraging in terms of infrastructure development, investment, and economic boost. But in the flow of the things, we are pushing metro into cities where they don't have even a formal public transport system during the last 50 years. So my question to the chairman, Agrawal sir, Dr. Agrawal is it a right thing, or should we actually work towards creating a habit of using public transport system in the cities? Because we are having conflict situations. The private mode of vehicles are easily available in terms of purchase parity, loans, finances, and various things. At the same time, government is investing huge amounts in the public transport system. But the city, as it is, never had a habit of using a public transport system. Do you have any answer to this investment Because ultimately these all investments have to be borne by the taxpayer. How do they pay? In a city which is not ready to pay public transport fare itself, how they will repay the loans or the investments?
Anyone who would like to take that? I would pass it on to Jaydeep, but let me try and answer this. I think, your question makes a lot of sense. What you're basically saying is, in a city where people are not used to public transport, they are used to personal vehicles or something of that sort. If you suddenly give them a high-cost public transport system, will the shift happen? That's really what I understand from your question, right? The way I would think of it is two ways. One, see, they may not have a formal public transport system. Many cities may not have a formal public transport system, but I know that there is some kind of an informal public transport system. It may not be, these small tempos that go around completely privately run. To some extent, there is a kind of an informal public transport system. I do agree that, from that stage, if you want to go into public transport, one option may be to think of a good bus service as the first stage and then move to something at a higher level. But the arguments that I hear differently are that unless you give them something which appears glamorous or appears at a higher social image, that shift may not still happen. So I'm myself a little confused, but your question I think is very legitimate. It's something that you want to add to that.
A very interesting question actually what you have asked. So no doubt about it that until unless there is a good public transport system available, people will not shift. So normally what we do, we create a public transport system. So what we call as pull and push strategy. So until unless there is a public transport system which as Sir was saying, which has those ingredients which a good public transport system should have: safety, reliability, affordability, and once there is a public transport system, then we have to strategize in a way that we put the push strategies also in place, and we implement the push strategies by increasing your parking charges or giving preference to people traveling in public transport, what we do like in a BRTS, and those kind of strategies we have to implement in the city with the coordination of the authorities, so that private transport is discouraged to some extent and public transport is encouraged. This looks to be the only way to practically implement it. What you are saying is perfectly alright, but this transition is to be managed. Change is to be managed. Thank you.
Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, see, actually in 2013, I did a project with OP sir, you were with World Bank at that time. There's a good chance that we may put up a metro MRT project and still the people don't use that public transport system. We reviewed Delhi in 2013 and we asked 10,000 users what were they using before metro, and we realized a lot of people who were in buses of public transport moved to metro because they found it comfortable, and still the two-wheeler, three-wheeler guys who were not using continued being there. And one of the key reasons why, even though there was investment and we were not seeing at that time, I'm sure that's kind of solved for now, but at that time one of the key reasons for on a per kilometer basis not great ridership as compared to global best was that the time to access and disperse out of metro station was almost 60% of the total trip time. And that's where people were not finding time saving, which is supposed to be one of the key reasons to be using public transport, or saving in the form of money for their travel. And there was significant amount of money being spent using IPTs, and that goes back to the fundamental planning question, that as you're trying to plan a public transport system, the last mile integration and this whole land use and transport integration becomes critical for the success of acceptability of a public transport system.
I don't know if you got your answer, but I can only assure you that this question, if we can debate over the next 3 days, will still not come to a conclusion, because it's a very important question, and I think many people are discussing this very important question, but great question. Thank you.
Sir, I come from Bangalore. About 42 kilometers of Bangalore Metro started functioning in 2017. And the DPR says that it was sanctioned to reduce the traffic on the roads and for the shift to happen from private vehicles to public transport, that is metro. So under RTI, I asked the Urban Development Department of Karnataka government as to how many people have actually shifted from private vehicles to metro and other public transport. So the answer I got was that they don't have any information. They have neither monitored it and they don't have it. They also sent my application to Bangalore Metro Rail Corporation and they also replied that they are not doing it. So sir, my question to you, particularly since you are in MOUD, who is accountable for making this shift happen? Because the situation today is that the shift has not happened. Bangalore is back to the same old congestion levels. There is no metro ridership also in line with the break-even figure required. So there is neither metro ridership nor the road traffic condition come down. So who is there anybody accountable for making this happen? That is my question.
Let me try and answer that. Manjula is sitting here, I could have asked her to answer for Bangalore. But rather than doing that, what I'll say is, see, this is not a problem which is unique to Bangalore. Frankly, it's a problem unique around the world. If you look at Beijing, Beijing has 900 kilometers of metro. And that city has 25,000 buses as against probably 6,000 buses in Delhi. Beijing's population is about the same as Delhi. Yet congestion levels are way beyond what you see in many cities around the world. Delhi itself, in the 10 years, that's the data I haven't looked at beyond that. But in the 10 years after the Delhi metro was operational, the number of personal motor vehicles doubled. And so this is something which is unique, and I think that's the reason why we are having this discussion. How do you accelerate that shift? I think everyone is struggling. My own sense is that cities which have managed to crack it are the ones that have done both. Created the supply, yet limited the demand. So when you take demand management measures like Singapore has done, plus have the supply management measures where you have much better public transport, really good taxi services, but make it very difficult for people to own personal vehicles, that's when the kind of shift takes place. Otherwise, you only think in terms of public transport easing to some extent, but more than easing, it is allowing some others who are not able to travel to begin to travel. That's the kind of it's a chicken and egg kind of thing that seems to be taking place around the world. If you don't use a mic, I can't hear you, so you have to.
It's not happening, it cannot be a unique issue. All that is fine. Who is supposed to make it happen? That's my question. Because then I'll go and ask that person, okay, why is it not happening? Because I don't know whom to ask. That's the question.
This is something that individual cities have to work towards. And this is where the conversation has been around creating that unified authority that takes responsibility for it. Otherwise, the problem is in Bangalore, for example, you have the Bangalore PMRC, you have the BMTC, both of them are doing their own thing. But where is that one agency that takes charge of all transport within the city and sort of make sure that everything moves okay? Now the question I often asked in BMRC, my earlier organization, office was very close to one of the metro stations. And I saw the footpaths in such poor shape near that metro station. And the question I was asking is, if your footpaths are not good, how do people reach that metro station? So now, the footpath is not the responsibility of the Bangalore Metro. It's the responsibility of the municipal corporation. So when you have fragmented responsibilities, your question actually goes unanswered by anyone. So we don't have that single authority. Singapore has the Land Transport Authority. Paris has STIF. London has Transport for London. So there are cities which have the single authority which has complete responsibility. That's what we are trying to really make sure that this should come up. Kochi has actually been a pioneer. They have, through law, set up the Kochi Metropolitan Transport Authority. Of course, it takes time for all to get fully operational, but I think that is critical today. That is critical.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? But again, fascinating question. Both the last two questions, I would say, fascinating questions.
Sir, there are...
Shivan, just one request. If you can come a little this side, the light is hiding you.
Sir, I'm Professor Swami from Central University. I have two questions to ask. One, we are creating a very high quality metro system as part of the network. Whereas the other one is a bus system.
Get the mic closer to you, sir.
Other one is the bus system, which is of very, very poor, low quality standard. And given these two, they can never form a network. If you really want to form a network, we also have to up the bus system service to a significant level. Given the capacities of the bus managing agencies, things don't seem to happen. Should the bus responsibility also be given to Metro so that they have the resources, they have a technical, professional ability? Would they be able to manage it better? That's one question. The second question I have is, on metros, in most cities, unlike maybe Ahmedabad is different, are we setting the fares right? When the bus fare is 4 rupees, 5 rupees, metro fares are 10 rupees, 15 rupees. Why would the passenger come on metros when they have an alternative? Even the rickshaw fares would be much lower than a metro fare. That's it. Thank you, sir. In fact, if you reduce the fare, you will double the passengers.
Whom did you ask this question to?
Yeah, both bus system and metro system have to complement each other. One is poor and the other is better. It will not work. Because obviously, those who use the metro, they come from their houses and go to their factories and then to their workplaces. So no doubt that both bus system and the metro system have to be upgraded to the same level where people are comfortable in using them by leaving their two-wheelers and four-wheelers behind. And as far as the fare structure is concerned, of course, it has to be affordable. If the one is lower, the other is higher. It is up to the city authorities to decide. But the more important out of this is the integration of the ecosystem as a whole. What you mentioned about the footpath. The people should be able to walk to the metro station, and those who are not within that distance, they should be able to have the other means of transport. We are promoting non-motorized transport, cycles, we are promoting e-scooters, and then comes the turn of the buses. There are other things other than the buses. All these things form the ecosystem, and we have to ensure that all of them go up. Now, whether one authority does it or the multiple authorities do it, in our country, whatever system we have to together ensure that the system works so that these massive projects of metros which have been created, they achieve their objectives.
Let me try to give you a little from my side. I'm stepping back a little. To start with when the Delhi Metro was being built. What was the background then? The background was an earlier metro was built in Calcutta. It took about 20 years to get built. And believe me, I was in the ministry at that time as a director. The big apprehension was that are we capable of building metro rail systems? That was the big question coming up, with this ministry being foolish in trying to build a metro. Is this at all possible? So I think the people who were leading that, the big thing in their mind was to demonstrate that a metro is possible. So it was much more of a civil engineering focus to make a success of the metro rail system, given the background of what happened in Calcutta. So that's why they really didn't think much beyond the metro. And I think that culture did continue for some time, but what I feel happy about today is, at least heard of, in Vinay's case, I have physically seen what is going on. I think the good news that I see is they are thinking beyond the metro. Today I think we've reached a stage where we are confident that metros can be built, we have the capability, there's no doubt on that. Now let's start getting ridership onto that. So that's, I think, the positive development that has taken place. Your second question about the fares, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. But there again, what I see from some of the fare fixation committee reports that I have had an occasion to look at, a lot of it is honestly not more than an arithmetic calculation of this is what our costs are going to be, and this is what we need to charge to be able to get the kind of revenues. And I have personally always argued that in any kind of a public transport system, let's not try to get fares to match your revenues, or let's not get fares to try and meet your costs. These are two very different things. Cost is a technical issue. It depends on what technology, what efficiency, what fuel efficiency, what kind of margin, purely technical issue. But what you are going to charge by way of fare is a public policy issue, where you are talking of how much of this cost is to be borne by the user. What we haven't conceptualized yet is what share of this cost should be borne by the beneficiary who may not be a user. Now this is a level of maturity that we need to get to, not just through a fare fixation committee, but much more at a higher level government policy, which Jaideep, I'm sure, is working on, is how do you create revenues which are dedicated to public transport, like they have in France, like they have in the US, the gasoline tax, which a fair share goes to public transport. I think this is where we need to move to next. That's the trying to answer both your questions. I don't know if we have just 5 minutes before we end, so
I'm just trying to elaborate on the question about the metro and bus system. If the cities do not have a good bus system, when you submit a DPR, then the bus DPR and the metro DPR, should it be submitted together, approved together, with the responsibility of the metro building agency to do both? I think that is where I am leading to. Thank you. Sir, but it is not in a good shape. I think that's.
Can you repeat it a little? Get the mic closer.
Yes, sir. My question is, when you make a DPR for a metro, we make a DPR for metro development, and then I think as VK Singh said, we try and do other things as part of the whole story. But when it comes to metro, if the city has no good bus system, should that metro DPR include bus improvement as part of the DPR, approved as part of the DPR, funding comes from the DPR as part of the DPR, responsibility is with them. I think, is it a good idea? Should we try and work it out? That's what I'm saying.
No, point taken, point taken. I think that's something that we have to really. Jaideep is here, he's heard you, he's the boss now. So, okay, I think we've sort of just about time to close. And to me, it's been a fascinating discussion, really fascinating discussion. And I would like to thank the panelists for their interventions. Really interesting, very rich discussion for me. But with that, thanks to all of you for being patient, listening to us. Thanks to all the panelists for your contributions. Thank you very much.
I would now request Shri Jaideep, OSD UT and UO JS Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs to come up on stage and honor the chairperson and the panelists of this session. Dr. O.P. Agarwal, chairperson of this session. Dr. Brajesh Dikshit, MD, Maharashtra Metro Rail Corporation Limited, Maha Metro. Mr. Vinay Kumar Singh, Managing Director, NCRT. Mr. Mihir Shorty, Senior Project Officer, Transport ADB. Thank you, Jaideep sir. Now, I would now request to Sri Loknath Behra, Managing Director, Kochi Metro Rail Limited, to come up on stage and honor our panelists. Partner PwC India. Mr. Laghu Parashar, Deputy Project Head, Smart SUP GIC. Mr. Thierry Desclos, Director of Project at Cinema France. Thank you, sir. We thank you for your joining us and for your cooperation. Thank you.
At 7 o'clock, we have a small surprise entertainment program. I request all of you to come and enjoy that program here in this hall. Thank you.